Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let's restart that. I went a little too. No, you know what? Let's not restart. A little too much excitement there. I'm just trying to pump you and me up. So sometimes it comes out a little too excitable. Happy day to you all. Hopefully you're doing well. I'll calm it down a little bit. But I just love environmental science. I absolutely love it. It's like my absolute passion. So sorry if I get a little too excited, right? But today we're going to talk about terrestrial production systems and food choices. Really, what we're discussing today is the process of making food. We're going to kind of take it away from soil. Obviously, soil is a big part of this because we're talking about soil and kind of bringing it into now producing the food. So keep soil in your mind while we go through this one. Things to talk about. Just make sure you're up to date on your workbook, part 5.2, part 1 today. There are some videos in there that you need to watch, and also some articles that you need to read in that part 1. So do know that it's not just my lecture video here. Also, do know that I'm going to try making this as quick as possible because there are quite a few videos you need to watch in this one. This kind of gets into the case study aspect, and instead of making you read all the time, I'm going to try giving you some case studies via video. All right, so stay with it, and I'll try making this as harmless as possible. First one being, actually, there's one in your workbook that you can watch, and then there's this one, Up in Smoke. Absolutely essential to understanding these processes and really understanding dirt and how that affects our agriculture. It really talks about slash and burn techniques, which will pop up in your quiz. So I'm not going to speak too much on it. I want you to watch that video and really kind of understand why slash and burn technique is so bad for the environment and why it doesn't help. Even in most cases, it happens in low economic developing countries, but usually it only lasts for a couple years and then there's a problem, and I want you to watch that. All right, moving along. The food systems, kind of into the history of it, have had its ups and downs. There's been pros. There have been the agricultural revolutions. Just when scientists think that we can't possibly get any more food out of the ground that we grow, scientists have create new things, whether they be genetically modified or pesticides would even fit in this category, or new farming techniques. We are able to produce more in the given area that we have. But obviously, we're not at the perfect area yet because we still use 50% of the terrestrial land for agriculture, which is unbelievable if you think about it. And that includes the tundra and desert regions, 50% of all land. So pretty crazy. And really, kind of going into that, but I won't speak on it too much. But 1950s and 60s was the Green Revolution, which really revolutionized agricultural methods. It's just kind of when we went over to, ox and cart, like doing things by hand, where the world really kind of switched over to using machines. And now I would say we're in another revolution, which now is absolutely essential. We won't talk about an IB, but just being from a farming community and background, I know it's bad and good. There are no more farmers like there are in Thailand, in the United States. They're so far and few between. The farmers in the United States now are these big corporations. And that's changing quite a bit. And with that is through the use of technology. Even the farmer with the tractor is not really seen as much as it used to be in the United States or developed countries. It's all computerized. It's all becoming automated. It's one of the actually, I read an article where it's the fastest growing AI kind of systems are now being utilized in farming in the United States and in other industrialized countries. Just know my family. I remember growing up. We had. It wasn't like they have farming here, but I would have my uncles and my cousins. They'd jump in the tractor. They'd have to get up every morning. Now it's like they click a button and they put it on a timing thing, so things are watered on time and harvested on time. It's pretty crazy. But there are negatives, right, when it comes to our food systems. We just have so many people on this planet. we're outgrowing the actual, we're outgrowing our pace kind of thing. Now we'll actually talk about how we actually are producing enough calories for everyone. It's just more about distribution, but we just have so much people in all the areas of the world that it is hard to keep up. And then we have desertification, land loss, banning of chemicals, changing diets to meat, which we'll talk about. Meat is horrible for the environment, and we'll kind of discuss that. And then new pests are due to global climate change. Pests are now, or they're adapting to better combat us and our ways of stopping them. So there are pros and cons to what we've seen in the past when it comes to agriculture. Currently, as stated, the calories needed to keep the world fed are being met, which sounds great. Good, we're done. There are no starving people on this planet, right? So we can go home. Wrong. Obviously, we know that's not the case. Now that so what it means, we're producing enough calories. It's just due to reasons, as you're going to see, they aren't either reaching the people that they need to, or the people aren't. Or we're kind of not a sharing process, or some people are getting too much, as we'll talk about as well. So that begs the question, so why do we have 870 million starving, undernourished people on this planet right now? Why do we have nearly, and in AP, when I teach AP, this actually number is closer to 1 billion, so it just give it or take who we were talking to here. But undernourished populations, 870, or 1 in 8 people are suffering from chronic undernourishment. So 1 in 8 are not getting the nutrition they need. Almost all live in developing countries, making up 15% of the population of those countries. 16 million live in developed countries, so there are people who are suffering in developed countries, but much less the amount. Undernourishment leads to many health problems, especially during development. This is funny. IB, we kind of talked about this briefly, but AP really has a whole section on just not giving the proper nutrition leads to many problems. So do know that it is important that you, even though we don't talk about it a whole lot, it is very important. And kind of going along with that, so it's not just a developed country versus, it is. It's the undeveloped countries are way more likely to have starving people. So it's, it goes back to that whole old adage, the haves versus the have-nots, right? It's all about distribution, or partly, I would say. Developed countries have built up infrastructure to consistently transport food, different sources of food to last year round, right? Like where I come from, I'm just going to use the United States for an example. One of there's 2 largest zones of growing is in the Midwest, where I kind of grew up. But it's a very in the middle of the continent, which has the best soil on. Actually, some of the best soil on the planet, but it's in the middle of the continent, so it gets very nice summers or very hot summers and then very cold winters, so it's only a seasonal thing. But luckily, the United States has Southern California, which is the second most heavily agriculturized zone in the world, if not the United States. But California can grow more year round. So, when the crops are done in the Midwest, well, then we can transport in oranges and avocados and everything else from Southern California. So it's this kind of thing where it can keep it going, right? Developed countries have those systems in place, or they can buy them from countries that do produce them. Undeveloped countries, not so much, right? There's political conflicts. Crops are exported to governments to gain income. So, this is kind of a big issue where, there are some governments that make their people grow tons of food, but then they sell it to their neighbors or to Europe, right? And then they make their people suffer, which is unfortunate. Climate change. We've talked about in the past how, Africa is the hardest hit continent on this planet. So a place that's already suffering is just going to get hit more and more, which is very, very unfortunate. Some countries can produce vast amounts of food, more than is needed within the countries. This is a great graph, but this is just showing you that disparity, right? There's the reason, we're meeting all the calories. This is how many people we have. This is how many calories the world's people need. We are producing that much, but why is there people starving? Well, there are some people who are overeating, right? The United States always comes to mind with a giggle with this, right? But I kid you not, Thailand is quickly catching up. It's insane how quickly Thailand is becoming an obese nation as well. They're not at the levels of many Western countries or the United States yet, but they are getting there. China has completely skyrocketed this. Why? Because they have more income. When you have more income, you start buying more food, right? So the fat countries, let's call them, are taking too much food away from the poor countries, or are hoarding the food to feed their people, right? So kind of interesting. This is definitely 2 videos you have to watch, but the haves versus the have-nots. Please watch these 2 videos. It just shows you the epidemic, how the United States shows some things, and then how the developed countries, there's starvation occurring in them. So please watch those 2 videos in conjunction with this. And there's changes of the number of undernourished people. Luckily, when it comes to undernourished, we are going down. Luckily, the world is becoming better about making sure everybody has food. Where it used to be, I remember when I was growing up, or 1970s, about half the world was undernourished. Now it's becoming less and less. It's only about 1 in 8. So we are making definite strides in this. But as you can see from this graph, kind of look at it, but it shows you the changes of where people were, maybe they were starving and now they're getting more calories, or vice versa. So please take a gander at that. And now let's kind of compare the MEDCs, or the most economically developed countries, versus the least economically developed countries. They have high food supplies for small population. That's why they're getting obese, right? You have more Big Macs per square mile, right? Where LEDCs don't have as much. Cause problems such as obesity. I think I already talked about that. And then low cost of food and all seasonal supplies of food. Why is it more low cost? Well, sometimes you can get a much cheaper food in developed country versus non-economic. You'd think, well, isn't that strange? Shouldn't it be cheaper for people? No, because the supply and the demand and the infrastructure is built up so well that food is kind of considered cheap in some of those countries. So you here, definitely in Thailand, I would put us in the MEDCs, or at least most of the population. Unfortunately, there are parts of the country that are still in the LEDCs, but for the most part, we have a good system in place where food can move around quite freely, right? And Thailand's lucky because we have a much longer growing season here. So global patterns of food intake. So this just shows you how there's certain countries, or there's certain first it kind of talks about there's just some climate zones or some soils that are just much better at producing food, and then you add on economics to that, which adds even more possibilities, and then social political under investment of rural areas in some countries are just not developed, so they can't get it. So think of it like this, ladies and gentlemen. I want you to really think about history. I don't know who your history teacher is or was in the past, but think about this when it comes to food, the access to food. Now, we can, often we get to this point where we can talk about Africa and the leadership in those countries, how poor the leadership is, right? Often civil wars happen there. Governments are toppled, and a new dictator comes into play. We can really say that about Africa, right? But what is the cause and effect there? Is that the cause? You have bad leadership. Is that the deep-rooted cause? Or could it be that Africa has just not had the infrastructure or the type of agricultural or educational abilities in the past that have built them up to compete with these countries now, like the United States, right? And now the United States has such a dominating factor that in a way they can always keep African countries down, right? So I want you to think about that when we're discussing these issues, okay? And we'll talk about that in much more detail later on. Another big problem, food waste. Absolutely horrible. There's so many good documentaries on this, and this is one of the biggest problems. Food waste is prevalent in both LEDCs and more economically developed countries, but for different reasons. As countries develop and consumption increases, so does the amount of waste per capita. So really, we have MEDCs have higher levels of consumption, but in MEDCs, half of the produce is thrown away. Why? What does that say? Ireland and U.S. produce over 700 kilograms of waste per person per year. Why? often because it's just not beautiful. Really, the reason is you're not going to go to the grocery store, and if there's a tomato with a dent in it, you're not going to eat it, right? Or your parents are probably not going to throw it in the shopping cart because it's ugly. And just know not all tomatoes look, or take into account all vegetables and fruits, they do not always look beautiful. So half of them end up getting thrown away or just discarded, right? So that's a key thing. Growing up in families, like I took it for granted where you could have a big plate of food and you'd eat half it, and then the rest of it would go in the garbage. There's actually on the next slide, you're going to watch what like Las Vegas is what they're doing to combat that. But it really shows you the difference in the type of use of food, right? Just we're producing enough calories, but in many developed countries, you're just throwing them away. In LADCs, the figure is around the waste is about 150 kilograms per person per year. The difference, though, is levels of consumption is more common to reuse items in LADC. So we just, even though you just get what you kind of take in those LADCs, so they throw away a lot less. As a country becomes more wealthy, the demand for consumer items increases. This means that items, my head's in the way, I can read it here though. That means the items are replaced more frequently, leading to larger quantities of waste. For example, mobile phones and computers that items already that still work may be discarded for a newer version, right? How many of you need the new iPhone, in your inventory, right? But food is the same way. If you see a little something wrong with it, maybe you throw it away. In LADCs, I also want to say it's infrastructure problem. That's why we have that 150 kilograms per person per year. It's maybe because it shows up rotten because they just can't get to it quick enough. So that's also a problem there. Into the trash it goes. I'm not going to read this slide, but I want you to take time on and just see how much food in category is wasted per year. It's insane and staggering and very, very sad. To be honest, think about this, ladies and gentlemen. Put all the pieces together. Sorry, once again excited. But think about it. 50% of the world's land is used to, to grow agriculture, right? We're not even talking about meat here. And then in developed countries, it's about 50% of what is grown is thrown away in the garbage. Think about that. So technically, the United States could be using only 25% of their land for agriculture reasons, but they need to grow so much because some of them look ugly. Sorry. But I'm trying to make a point here, right? You have to think about this absurdity of it all. Maybe not just better growing techniques, but maybe we can learn how to just eat the food that is being produced, and we would meet the demand, right? We'd meet the quality or the amount of calories that we need. And this is just a food capita food losses and waste kilogram per year. So the red is how much consumers throw away, and then production to retailing. So that's kind of the shipment of it, or the factories, maybe cleaning the apples or whatever that is thrown away in that process. So obviously, and even just the production, a lot more food is, not a lot more, but about 2/3 food is wasted. But we can solve these issues, ladies and gentlemen. You need to solve these issues. They seem so stupid, and that's the thing, right? Like farmers could make more money. They would have to they could do less, but just grow more food, or not waste as much food. It just seems like this is one area where I just kind of roll my eyes at humanity, right? So if you see a little apple with a dent in the supermarket next time, buy it, eat it. It's good. Just clean it off, right? And this is the case study I definitely want you to watch, but Vegas Fight on Food. It definitely goes into a few techniques on how they're trying to cut down on food waste. So that's a big one. Ladies and gentlemen, you have to watch these videos on it because they are part of the case studies and they might pop up on the quiz or exam. Okay, that's at 19 minutes, so I'm going to stop right there. Ladies and gentlemen, please have a great day. Hopefully I did not scare you, but think about these big issues. And once again, remember, agriculture is the biggest, as we're going to find out, is the biggest contributor to fossil fuels. It's the biggest contributor to environmental degradation. It's the biggest factor to species loss, biodiversity. agriculture is a number one problem. Obviously, we can't get rid of agriculture because you and I need to eat, right? But we need to change the system. All right, so get thinking about that, and we'll discuss that further. All right, please have a great day. I will stop here and enjoy.